All right, everybody. We're back, and after a little bit of a hiatus, we're finally rounding out our commentary on the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight Trilogy. We're going to talk about Rises. So, if you've listened to the other commentaries or any commentaries we've done, you know how you know the deal at this point. If you have a copy of the movie that you'd like to watch alongside the commentary, get it to timestamp 0, and when we say now, we'll collectively press play. If not, you can listen to this by itself. We should be able to provide enough context that this can be listened to in a vacuum. And without further ado, let's get it on. So let's press play in 3, 2, 1, now. And yeah, so like I was mentioning just before we started, this is not going to be the rave that the Begins and Dark Knight commentaries were. The consensus on Rises is definitely that it's the weakest of the three, and I felt that coming out of the theater with it for the first time back in 2012. But I don't know. How was your first viewing of this?
Well, before I even answer that, I just want to apologize for the, I don't know, 12 or how many even that care at this point, that I fell asleep during our last commentary. I definitely overestimated oh, underestimated, I should say, how tired I was, and I was drained. Um, the, but I love that movie. I know that, came across at least several times. And I apologize to everyone for blanking out like in the middle of that movie. Um, as far as this movie goes, it's interesting because when first went to go see this, um, I saw it. Well, first of all, I was grounded, and as punishment, I wasn't allowed to see Amazing Spider-Man because my parents knew I was a huge Amazing Spider-Man fan, and that came out around the same time as this, and they were both in theaters. So I tell them I'm going to see this movie, and then I sneak into a screen of Amazing Spider-Man. And then I knew my parents were eventually going to, just forget about me until I called. So I said screw it and just went over to a screen in Dark Knight Rises just to see it, right after. And I went from really liking Amazing, despite having, my fair share of criticisms, to being completely and totally baffled by the bizarre thing that is this movie. It is extremely well made, well shot. The score is incredible. Um, I think it's got some huge pacing issues, and I think everyone is acting like the actors are all great, obviously, but the script is just not there for this movie. It's nowhere near the quality of the first two movies, um, and that was really, really disappointing and disorienting to me. I also don't like this is around when we start just shooting our big action scenes in IMAX. I went to go see this in IMAX, and then it would cut back to regular aspect ratio, and I really hate that.
Mm.
Um, yeah, like I need one ratio. Like if you're gonna do IMAX like full screen, like just shoot the whole movie like that. Um, weirdly enough, the first U.S. movie to do that is in Infinity War, Avengers: Infinity War. Um, it took us all the way until 2018 to finally make a movie like that. Um, but anyway, yeah, like this is where um, Tom Hardy's very interesting, unique, and bizarro take on Bane is forever cemented in pop culture, and we all laugh and make fun of his ridiculous voice.
It's,
Um,
I mean, honestly, because the impressions of this voice that you hear in like cartoons that are straight up comedies are only marginally sillier than the actual Tom Hardy voice.
um, and what's interesting about it is there's actual intensity going on behind his eyes, and Tom Hardy actually has a weird history of having his face covered multiple times
Mm-hmm.
and giving these like really intense performances. Um, he He's really good at Mad Max as well, and he has a similar situation going on there with his face covered. But yeah, this take on Bane, as a character, I really hate and don't like because he's saying a bunch of like he basically spews out a bunch of rhetoric that ultimately doesn't add up or mean anything because we don't ultimately know anything about Bane. We don't really know what drives him. We don't really know anything about his philosophy. Like he's an
Yeah.
ex-member of the League of Shadows, but we don't all of his actual backstory is kind of falsified for the sake of a dumb reveal at the end that doesn't make any sense with Talia. And this is just not the Bane that they came up with is not interesting. Um, and since Nolan is like so steadfast in his this has got to be grounded in realistic thing, we don't give him the venom. So he's just a really strong guy, but he's not super strong. Um, it's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, overall, like I don't think this movie is written really well at all. It's it's weird that like I get it. Of course, originally Christopher Nolan like he had ideas in his head for a third movie that definitely would have included Joker, which is why he didn't kill him. But of course, the tragic passing of Heath Ledger, he wasn't able to do that. And because of that, Joker isn't mentioned anywhere in this movie. In this movie, from the get go, does not really make sense as a natural progression of Dark Knight.
Yes, and
Like
I have a
Batman
point
just
about
stops
that.
making he just stops his fight against crime, just exiles himself. Like not only as Batman, but as Bruce Wayne for 8 years. It's a really weird, bizarre, really just counterintuitive place to put Bruce Wayne from premise at the start of this movie. And then to act like it's a trilogy and like you planned it this way when it just doesn't jive at all.
Yeah, and like I feel really bad because I know that there are people who do love this movie, and I'd feel bad for any of them if they're gonna listen to what's probably gonna be a lot of us being pretty negative, but I agree in that I feel like the problems with this movie are like in its bones in a way that you can tell Christopher Nolan did not plan on doing a sequel to The Dark Knight, and that comes through in the way that this doesn't really feel like a follow up to that, and that includes the way that we handle all of the Harvey Dent stuff. Like we'll get to it where we pay a lot of lip service here in the first opening minutes of the movie to the impact of Harvey Dent and his legacy. And then that aspect of the movie just kind of falls out of it until we get to like the hour and a half mark where Bane lets loose all the prisoners. And it's like it's an afterthought. It's like Nolan was approaching this as its own thing, and only late in the game was like, oh, right, this should probably be a follow up to the previous movie in some way. So all of the ways that it tries kind of half heartedly to be a Dark Knight sequel feel like forced in and not really capitalized on. And to speak to what you said about the pacing, I feel like it's really hard to put into words why this is, but like I had like a joke where I was gonna say I might be the one who falls asleep this time because I I can't help it. This is a hard movie to make it through in one sitting for me. And like The Dark Knight and especially Batman Begins feel like they move at a clip. And comparatively, Rises is like a slog that I have a real difficult time engaging with. It it feels it's 2.5+ hours more
It
than the
really
previous movies did.
yeah, it really does. I really hate this scene.
Yeah, I don't like this. He's
Like
so conspicuous about this.
yeah, like he's like maybe right now all you need to know. And it's like he's talking down to these people and like acting like he clearly has something to hide and it's like no one's going to question this at all.
Yeah, like for a Nolan movie that are like usually about like subtlety in the performances and being very grounded, this is a very almost cartoonishly way to have Gordon go about this. It's like, well, I suppose it's time I told you the truth about Harvey Dent, but maybe not. And it's like someone in that crowd would be questioning this. Like,
Yeah, well, it's like what is the truth and why are you having this Why are you changing your mind about telling us? Like, and all of them look like cardboard cutouts. None of those extras even have the slightest expression.
Hmm.
They're
It's like
not
what? Why?
sad. They're not angry. They literally feel nothing.
Yeah, if you cut to a reaction shot of them and they were looking a little confused, like they knew Gordon was acting weird, then that'd be fine. But like here, everyone just like doesn't even question why are you talking like that?
It is so weird to me that hardcore Batman fans actually talk about Michelle Pfeiffer and as in terms of like she's the best Catwoman, and I'm like, that character is not Catwoman. She is not Selena Kyle. She's a femme fatale, but that's that's it. Like she's that character is in no way Selena Kyle.
But this
Um,
one gets that better and is
yes,
probably the best part of this movie.
one of the best parts. She's definitely the best Selena that we've had in live action so far.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm really excited to see what they do with Selena in the Batman with Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves at the
And that
helm. And I really,
gets here in a year and a half.
yeah, but I think she's played really well by Anne Hathaway. Um, not who I not who I would have chosen. In I mean, it has less to do with her and more to do with the movie in general. But I can't say she's particularly memorable. Um, but she's good. She's really good. She's really solid. Um, she's the best we've had so far. That's not even saying much, but I like her a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. The bits focusing on her feel like the only times that this movie is really like allowing itself to have any fun. And like that suits her character. And it makes her, if not the most memorable, then like the most engaging part of the movie as I'm watching it. And like
Um,
she does such a great job of playing like you wouldn't suspect her based on her performance. She's really good at like code switching.
and the turn here is really nice. The
Mm-hmm.
second Bruce puts together that she's wearing uh his mother's pearls right here, and then she goes, "Oops!" Like she completely drops the facade, and it's so cool.
And she also drops him.
Yeah, not gonna lie, this is the most I've ever liked us even making a big deal out of the pearls. Because of course we get that ridiculously stylized
Mm-hmm.
scene in BVS where the Bruce Wayne's killer puts um the so like the hammer that's on the gun, like he puts the gun in between the pearls, and when he shoots the necklace, well, he shoots Bruce's mom, the necklace like explodes off the gun, and it's just like he does it so it can look cool, but it's just so goofy if you think about that for 2 seconds.
Yeah. And that flip she gives out the window's great.
It is, yeah. Um, we so uh Nolan makes this movie so he's allowed to make, I think, Inception.
Right, yes.
Yeah. So Warner's cuts him a deal. They give him a huge check, and they also give him the budget that he wanted for Inception. I'm pretty sure. So he's making this movie so he can make another movie. This is a contractual obligation. His heart's not really in it. Um, like since Heath Ledger died, he would have been perfectly fine just ending it there. Um, Warner Brothers really kind of strong arms him into making this movie, and unfortunately, like despite how well the movie is made, because he's good at his job, I think the movie, like the biggest problem with it is the script and like premise from top to bottom. Like we have a premise that does not really make sense for the ending of our last film. We have a really underwritten villain that at the end of the day is just spilling out a bunch of platitudes that don't ultimately mean anything because we don't know anything about him. For the sake of a villain that really is just lame and dumb, and that reveal is not at all. Like we completely throw Bane under the bus for the sake of that reveal, and it's not
Yeah.
compelling at all. I like that we have what's ostensibly going to be another, well, not even another Robin because we haven't had a Robin before, but because we for the longest time, especially like living with Dark Knight for so long, I didn't think no one would ever entertain bringing in like the Bat family, like having a bunch of sidekicks and stuff. Especially since he was going more grounded with this, and like, does it really, and practically, does it really make sense for Bruce Wayne to be recruiting a bunch of minors to help him fight crime?
Yeah. Although I still don't think of John Blake as that, just because by the end of this movie, he's taking on the Batman role, we're led to assume. And also, the line itself about his middle name being Robin feels like such a throwaway thing and like such a last minute addition.
Yeah, that's
So,
just
like,
a cheeky little wink for the fans. But
yeah, and
like,
like I'm convinced that that line was ADR. Like, we'll get to it when we get to it, but I'm pretty sure that was done in post.
it wouldn't surprise me. It's not ultimately important. Um, yeah, not really. This is gonna be a hard movie for us to talk through for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it's like it's part of its problem is that it really doesn't justify its length this time. And so there's like I took notes for this and there's a long stretch of this movie where there's just no notes because nothing particularly interesting sprung to mind. That said, I'd have like maybe I don't know how, but I'd have made a bigger deal out of this of where it's the fact that Selena took the pearls that gets Bruce back into the Batcave and using these resources for the first time in years. Something about the way that Alfred comes down and he's just here and we don't make a big deal out of that is a little weird to me.
I definitely understand that. Um, I don't know how they would have, I guess,
Yeah,
glorified
it's
the
not
moment
really
because
something I have like a solution for.
yeah, do we put like big swelling Hans Zimmer music in the background when Alfred steps in? Because at the end of the day, like he's just back in the Batcave. Like he is not at all considering to be Batman again. At least not yet.
Mm. Well, I think the implication here is that, like Alfred is suggesting, he's in danger of doing that because, like, he's just so eager to be doing something. But yeah, he's not at the stage yet where he's got like a reasonable excuse to actually put on the suit again or anything. And he won't have for another half hour, I'm pretty sure. I think it's at least 45 minutes in before we get him back in the suit.
Cap and Eric tackle this movie brilliantly in Batmania, and they pretty much articulate every single issue I have with this movie.
It's been a while since I listened to that. I should give that another listen. Yeah.
You definitely should. Um, yeah, every single issue I have, they touch on it.
Nice.
In fact, like it's been so long since I've even seen this movie and really thought about it to where like I'm forgetting problems that I have with it. At least like fully in depth, like every single thing. The major beats are coming to me as we're watching it. Um, but I remember just having for the longest time having a laundry list of things I did not like about this film.
And like I had something similar, and I feel like that's a lot of people's. Like this movie, for the bulk of it, is not the most memorable. We'll get to specific scenes where I think it's trying to do similar things to what to what the Dark Knight did, and just not quite pulling it off as well or as memorably. But I rewatched this one last night in preparation for this, and I was like, yeah, the reason I don't remember a lot of this is that a lot of it just doesn't leave much of an impression. And like so much of it kind of feels I don't know if the word is like procedural in the way that a lot of people can accuse Nolan of being often. It's kind of like chess pieces moving without really telling a ton of story. And like I don't want to accuse him of being a bad storyteller, but like you said, you can feel in this movie the sense of obligation. Is like he's just doing this because it's expected of him to make a Batman movie that does certain things and reaches a certain runtime. And this does not feel like The Dark Knight and Begins feel as long as they do because Nolan needed that time to tell the story he wanted to tell. This does not feel like that.
Yeah, and early on in the film, the only scenes that have a real palpable energy and that I'm really engaged in is, as you said, scenes like this with Selena. Um,
And here's Bern Gorman. Most people will probably recognize him from Pacific Rim. I know him primarily as Owen from Torchwood, and I've always liked him.
yeah, I feel like he's either a bad guy or a seedy guy in most of the things he's in.
Yeah. He's in Enola Holmes too, I think. That just
Which
like a week ago.
yeah, I'm definitely gonna watch that either today or tomorrow, actually.
Yeah, I should probably. I keep like making plans to watch it, and then I forget. So I should probably do that tonight too.
Um, this has the major issue that a lot of um third arcs in movie series have, where we make it the back in the saddle thing. We spend a lot of time with the hero out of costume, like with Iron Man 3, or with Skyfall in the Daniel Craig's James Bond trilogy. That's not even a trilogy. But series of movies. That's the third film in that series. But what I'm trying to say is we spend a lot of time with the hero not being the hero anymore. They they got to get back in the saddle. They got to get back in the game. And
Mm-hmm.
Iron Man 3 handles that a lot better. Um, and so does Spectre, because both of those are genuine, solid, trackable character studies. And with Iron Man, we understand that he's suffering from the trauma um, coming out of the first Avengers film. And
Yeah, like Iron Man, I don't even necessarily think of as like a getting back in the saddle movie.
I'm talking about
Just
Iron
be-
Man 3 specifically.
yeah, no, yeah, but like even that one, he's still technically like doing his thing even before that movie starts. This one has, and again, like I don't want to read too much or like project too much of Nolan himself work like his circumstances. I'm sure for him this might not have been on purpose, but it feels here partially like okay, we choose to skip the 8 years and have Bruce be inactive all that time because it's sort of reflective of Nolan being like, all right, I thought I said goodbye to this thing, and now they're pulling me back in for one last job.
But that doesn't really make sense. Like, I don't have that read at all. Um, Mainly because I don't know why you as a director would go so far as, especially since he didn't really like he didn't write this movie. He didn't write any of the movies.
It's
Um,
true.
yeah, he's had his influence in it, obviously, but he didn't write this. And I don't know why, as a writer, you would just decide to, take this personal journey from the director and just throw that into the story and make that the journey of the main character. Like, that doesn't really make sense to me. That doesn't track. Um,
He might
I
have made
will,
suggestions in the early stages. Who knows?
but the to draw it back to the three arcs thing, like Bruce for a large majority of this movie, first of all, the decision to isolate himself as both Batman and Bruce Wayne makes absolutely no sense. And we immediately undermine him as a character because the guy in those first two movies does not just quit. Um, and I also don't buy that Batman, like as a force in Gotham taking on crime, is not needed anymore by the end of that film. Um, you would have people who are still, because the like, you just took care of the Joker. There's still all the gangsters who are following him. Like, I don't buy that the even if the Dent Act cleared up most of the criminals associated with the mob, you would still have crime. Um, like that movie ends and 99.9% of crime is just locked up in jail. Like I don't buy that at all. Um, so that right there is really faulty, just premise wise. And then with Bruce deciding to give up his Batman and Bruce Wayne, he immediately gives up on the energy machine, throws his company into free fall, and is just a passive, non-proactive dud for 8 years. Why would you make that Bruce Wayne? That's not Bruce Wayne.
Although, just to be clear, they do say that I'm not sure. Was it 3 or 5 years? Like, he gave up on the company like 3 years ago, I think, in the energy project. But that's still pretty egregious. Of like, it's I get it. This Bruce Wayne is not like the driven all the time, all hours of the day machine that other incarnations of Bruce can do. But even with that said, you're absolutely right in that it's not in this guy's character at all from what we've seen in the previous two movies to sit and what is he doing? He's not doing anything for anyone for years at a time. That doesn't so
Yeah,
weird. Why
we made
why?
Bruce Wayne a quitter off screen.
Yeah. And like if he just quit being Batman then fine, but he's not doing anything.
But that's not the case. He quit that night. He quit being Batman that night.
Mhm. Which is not at all the feeling that you get leaving the Dark Knight.
Despite how short Tom Hardy actually is in real life, they always shoot him from under to make him look a bigger, and that I think that's really effective. He's a really
Yeah,
threatening presence. Um, it's 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 unfortunate how much the voice undermines that, but he actually has an intimidating presence to him.
yeah. Like Tom Hardy's just natural screen presence is probably like 80%, if not 100%, of what makes Bane work in any given scene. And here, okay, we're here already. This doesn't make a lick of sense. And like the movie doesn't even try to make it make sense or feel natural in that Blake knows that Bruce was Batman based on a look that he saw in his eyes one time or something. I don't get it. This is so dumb.
This is really dumb. In Gotham of all places, that look can't be that unique.
Yeah, and like I get it, like he didn't expect him to have that look because he's a rich boy, but like his parents died. Whether or not that has anything to do with him being Batman, that's probably gonna mess him up a little bit. And it sucks because Joseph Gordon-Levitt is delivering this monologue really well, but it's just so stupid.
Yeah, it's contrived and dumb no matter how you slice it. And it's sad because he's acting the shit out of this scene.
Yeah. And like I say that Catwoman is the best part of this movie, if it's not her, it's him.
It is, yeah. Just seeing him working the case, on patrol, trying to look into um, what's going on with Bane and the people that he's rallying. Like all that stuff is solid. But like any of the meat and potatoes of the actual villain arc and like the plan of this movie is ridiculous. We haven't even gotten to that yet. I'm sure we can get to that when we actually get to the nuclear reactor and the bomb and
Which is a while yet because so we've got like a ton of minutia and setup to go through before we even realize that that's happening. And it's really interesting, I think, on paper to have like the successor to the Batman mantle be someone who's from such a completely opposite background to Bruce, and who, like, in all of his mannerisms and like speech and just the way that he presents himself isn't remotely similar to how we think of like Bruce Wayne, but he's got even more than Bruce does at this point, that same sort of like moral code and that same drive to do the right thing no matter what. And you see it happen a lot in third chapters of things, or like things late in the game in a franchise, where we'll introduce a new character and they become really prominent and they kind of feel like they don't belong. But Blake he's really a boon to this movie. He's really compelling.
This stuff is like keeping in line with the grounded thing. This is interesting of like him finally. But what kind of undermines it is the 8 years thing and the fact that it feels like he hasn't even been Batman that long.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was Batman for all of what, uh 2.5, 3 years in this version.
It seems that way, yeah.
Yeah, and then 8 years later, he's got all these injuries from way back then. That has more weight if he'd stuck with it.
Well, was that the intent? Because, like, the lacking cartilage thing, I assumed that was because of the 8 years and the fact that he didn't do anything with his leg and he just let it atrophy, basically.
Maybe. Um, I mean, I don't think there's that's up to interpretation.
Yeah, I don't think it's very clear.
Oh, also, I think that that moment with Gordon is really dumb. It's a big like traitor follower moment. It's kind of dumb because it's like they don't even really know that much about what's going on yet. None of them have even like he uh he saw Bane really briefly, but it's like you don't know this guy's plan yet, what he's really capable of, and you're like, Batman's gotta come back. Like, there's no way the cops can handle this. Like, he has to. He's gotta come back.
Well,
We need you, Batman. It's like you don't even know that much about the situation yet, if anything.
that's true, but he's a big guy who wears a mask, so Batman has to fight him.
Yeah, that was like a really cool ominous moment in the trailer, and then in the context of the movie, it's like that's just dumb. That
I
feels
saw
really
this
dumb.
guy. He looks real bad, so can you take care of him, please?
Um, it's a. I remember thinking like the reveal is fine enough, but like she's really on first viewing, like she's charming and nice, and
And we're talking about Miranda Tate.
you're talking. Yeah, I'm talking about Miranda Tate. Like she's charming and nice, and she's got kind of like a light accent, and like I get the impression she's definitely not native to Gotham. Like she moved. She's from somewhere exotic, like maybe Italy or something. Um, but that reveal, despite quote unquote being surprising, is it falls flat on its face because we undermine Bane to do it, and we kind of undermine the entire villain plot to do it. And this plan of hers ultimately does not make sense.
Yeah, and like you said, the character has a charm to her, but part of the reason the reveal falls flat is by the time we get to it, Miranda Tate is still just kind of like not like I don't want to call her a nothing character, but she's close enough to it. Like
Yeah, she's
she
close
doesn't,
to nothing in this movie.
yeah, she really doesn't leave the biggest impression. And we'll get to a part later on where like they sleep together, and it feels completely out of nowhere. And like the only reason it happens is okay, sex will be our shorthand for okay, these two have kind of a relationship now, and Bruce is supposed to care about her. But even after that, like she's such a weird like she's what Blake could have been if he was handled worse. Of where here's this character who wasn't in the previous two movies, but is supposed to be really, uh, really prominent now, but we don't really do the character work and we don't do all the legwork to make that happen. We just say she's important. So like
I
Miranda
don't,
Tate comes up a lot and she's on screen a good amount, but none of that time really goes to making her interesting, I don't think.
well, I don't necessarily think it's about making her important. I think it's to completely wean the audience off the idea that we're supposed to like nothing inherently is telling you to not trust her, but going as far as letting her sleep with Bruce is that's your way of immediately like she can't be evil. She couldn't possibly be involved in like the villain plot in any way because our main character just had sex with her.
Yeah. And all this stuff
That's
that Selena's saying right now, like her whole thing about the class stuff and like Wayne being from privilege, this is interesting. And the movie does keep coming back to it the way that sort of it feels a little bit like it's building on the thing with the Joker where Bruce was raised a certain way and he's got like his lived experience makes him believe like people like Joker have to be out for money, and that comes in part from him being from money. And now like we're really interrogating that, so people like Catwoman and Bane are coming from far less privileged places, and Bruce has to sort of let go of that privilege that he has if he wants to be on their level and defeat them or like turn them. But the movie doesn't. I
the
don't know. A
movie
lot
really
of
about that,
a lot of the class stuff and the socio-political commentary doesn't feel complete. Which,
especially because Bane is prattling on about that in this rhetoric he gives to the people, like especially when he lets the prisoners out. But it's like we don't know how the public at large feels about the class system.
yeah,
Um,
when we got to that scene, I was gonna say like it's such a weird choice that we get reactions from the prisoners, but none from just regular people of Gotham, and we never check in on those people really.
yeah, because they're not people. We don't make them people like we did in Dark Knight when even
Hmm.
even prisoners on a boat have a conscience enough to not blow up other people on the boat for the sake of their own survival.
Yeah, or like even before that, when the Joker's gonna like, I'm gonna blow up a hospital, and regular people are just like committing like what are potentially acts of violence because understandably they're just people on the ground who have family in there and they don't want them to die. But we don't get anything to that effect in this movie. It's almost like the regular citizens, the masses of Gotham don't exist. Like we've got the prisoners and the cops and then our main characters, and everyone else is hardly even on screen.
Immediately it felt like we were gonna do the straight up underdog thing for the third movie, where it's like we take away all of Bruce Wayne's gadgets. We take away all of his toys and see how he deals with Bane and his mounting army. And I thought that's what the movie was doing, and it's really not. Like we take away his money, but then we like the second time that he's in the suit again, um, he gets the snot kicked out of him by Bane, and then he spends the other half of the movie locked up in a prison.
Yeah,
So
and
we
like during that time, Bane takes all the stuff from applied sciences, and you've basically got like Bane has like tumblers at his disposal and stuff, and that could be interesting. But even then, we don't do a ton with it. Like Bane has like 4 or 5 Batmobiles at his disposal, along with everything else they were developing for Batman to use, and they're just kind of there. But the movie doesn't really make a big deal out of that at all.
well, my major complaint with it is that sure um we give a lot of Bruce's toys to the bad guy, but then we just let Bruce have everything he needs out of his armory. Like he's got the bat still, um, and
It's
that's how
really
he
weird with that because, like, even in the third act, Bruce doesn't really use a ton of gadgets, which is another complaint I could lob at this movie. Is that if the action and the way that like Batman is implemented into like the action and stuff feels a little less creative, a little less smart. It's just a lot of brawling. But you're right in that really all he needs is the bat. Like he's got a flying tank pretty much, and that serves all the purposes that he needs. There's no real stretch of this movie outside of him being in the prison where it feels like Batman is at any real disadvantage.
exactly. Um, and when you go as far as taking his money away from him and taking Alfred away from him, I think you should double on that and take as much from this character as you can and see how he's able to come out the other side and still win through his ingenuity, through um through his know-how and his smarts. But
Mhm.
like to hand him the bat so he can fairly easily solve the big problem at the end, I think is kind of lame. Um, yeah, and then like the really dumb kind of nothing payoff of the autopilot thing because we briefly mentioned autopilot in the previous scene, and then we'll quote unquote pay it off at the end of the movie, and it's like okay, all right, like I don't know, that whole thing is just the worst, and we can talk about the whole dumb autopilot thing when we get to it, but
Yeah,
um,
like I don't want to go too far into like the ending stuff of this movie just because like I want to save that for when we get to it. But this is another thing of like we were talking about. There's comparatively little to say about especially the big middle stretch of this movie, so it's kind of difficult not to talk about the later stuff. But like the thing I was gonna mention was it's just like Batman gets stabbed by Talia in the end, and like we make a big deal out of that. And then it seems like that stab wound just didn't affect him at all because we've got this weird thing of okay, Bruce is in the prison, and that's like his big Dark Night of the Soul. That's his big low point. But then as soon as he gets out, you'd expect him, like you said, to still be challenged, and he's now like Gotham is now Bane's turf. But as soon as Bruce leaves that prison, he's pretty much got the win button, and he has no real problem just doing what he needs to do for the rest of the movie.
this is our kind of our first big action scene of the
Mm-hmm.
film. Um, I like I think it happens here when he smashes this guy's head into the desk. I
Yeah.
like Bane's brutality. Um, it's really it's really visceral and it oh yeah, that.
Mm.
Even though we didn't give him his classic venom for the super strength, he's still pretty imposing and threatening.
Yeah. And like a thing I do like about Bane that's consistent is like his his complete like lack of regard for personal space, and you know that he's about to kill you if he gets like all up in you and just starts touching you. He almost treats people like objects in that way. Like he just drags that guy along by his tie and by his suit. And see, we keep bringing it back to like the fact that he's here at the stock exchange at all. We keep bringing it back to like the class thing and the economics thing. And it's admirable that this movie has something on its mind by continuing to bring that up, but it doesn't really end up saying anything like solid, I don't think. And like this and another sequence that we'll get to later is what I mean when I talk about kind of aiming for the same thing the Dark Knight was doing in terms of like this would be a sequence in that movie where the Joker and whatever gang he has like pull off a scheme or like yeah, just like executing a plan. And there are a ton of like the villain executing their plan sequences in the Dark Knight that are super compelling and like really tense. And this one doesn't have that same feeling.
No, I don't necessarily even need it to. Um, Honestly, I kind of have a weird aversion to even making Bane this in in the first place, like making him uh essentially a terrorist. Um,
Yeah.
because he's not even really that in most of actual Batman.
Hmm.
But yeah, this whole chase scene in general is pretty underwhelming and kind of maybe the least engaging chase scene in the whole trilogy, if not one of the most kind of whatever, like least memorable chase scenes I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, and you know the thing is, it never even occurred to me to compare it to like the big chase sequences of the previous two movies. But in part, like obviously you don't want innocent civilians to die, but there's just no sense of stakes to this chase the way that there was before. Like putting aside that the chase itself isn't all that impressive and there's not really any creative moves. And like it really sucks that here we finally got our big introduction Batman's back and it feels kind of limp because it's in this comparatively unremarkable action sequence. But think back to Batman Begins. In that movie, the chase sequence, like what was at stake there was we gotta get Rachel to this place or this toxin's gonna kill her. And then in the Dark Knight, like the Joker is targeting Harvey and we gotta save Harvey. Here, like especially for like middle class people who are gonna be watching this movie, I think it would be hard for a lot of us to feel any sense of stakes and like, oh no, Bane stole a couple hostages and all of the stock market data. Like we had that exchange a couple of minutes ago where the guy's like, I keep all my money in my mattress. Well, if you don't stop these guys, then those bills are going to be worthless. So it feels like the movie's trying to make the audience understand why what they're doing is a big deal, but I still feel like it doesn't feel like it matters as much as if you put a character we know and care about in danger. This is just okay. Is basically just a high concept bank robbery.
And I looked at the timestamp when we finally see Bruce in the suit again. It's 64 minutes and like 40 seconds. And
You mean 46?
yeah, 46 minutes and like 30 seconds
Mm.
or 40 seconds. We finally see Batman in costume, and I'm like, finally. Like, I don't remember exactly how long we took to get to Batman in Batman Begins, but it's a fairly long, substantial time, and I'm not tapping my foot waiting because I'm invested. And in this
Mm-hmm.
movie, like, I'm so damn near tuned out at this point that I'm like, finally.
Yeah.
Like, I can, that's an origin movie. I can go back to Batman Begins, um, and not at all be tapping my foot waiting for the Batman stuff to start because it's just a good movie and it invests you right away. Um, and I'm never bored. So like we get to Batman, we tell the story, and so I'm not. It's effective. Like it's effective. Really smart and compelling storytelling, and we're managing pacing. With this movie, like it's just we don't really have that.
Yeah, again, it's so weird to like think of this in comparison to the other chase sequences where the setup is pretty much the same. It's the Batman, the villain, and the cops, and you just this chase hardly even felt like a chase. Like it just felt kind of like stuff happening, pretty much.
Like, yeah, Batman's back. I'm wondering how he would have got away from the cops if that ramp wasn't there.
Yeah. That said, that bike is still rad. I suppose I do like that idea of like fully sort of seeing the Batman as like a thing to a feather in his cap to the point where he loses track of Bane and everyone else because Batman is his priority.
Yeah. So I kind of hope we get away from this and never do this again. And what I mean is the quote unquote grounded thing. Every superhero movie's got to be grounded, or every director is using that word to describe their comic property, and it's really annoying. Like that doesn't always apply to everything. That was the tact Nolan decided to take with this trilogy, and it worked for the first two movies. This movie's not good, so I mean, I guess I couldn't really care less if it was grounded or not, but it really aggravates me that um like that's the big takeaway and the big bandwagon that Hollywood jumped on. It's like it's grounded. See, that's the ticket. We got to make it grounded. It's got to be dark and grounded. Like I hate that adjective and that we're so fixated on that now.
Yeah, we have been moving away from it. Well, and like before we get too far from it, I think interestingly, part of the issue there is that when Nolan does occasionally indulge in like a little bit of goofiness, it feels out of place because that bit where Foley's like he's caught like a rat in a trap, and then the guy's like, "You've got the wrong animal there, sir." Like that's so cheesy in like the bad way. It's like it feels so weird and out of place in these movies.
It does, yeah. There's also another bit. Um, wait, I gotta save that for when we get to it. But there's another bit I'll point it out where the humor doesn't work.
Although the one of the grounded-ish things that I do like is that Catwoman doesn't dress like a cat. She's got the goggles that look like cat ears when she flips them up. That's a clever little thing.
Yeah, it's a smart stylistic choice for these movies. It's not my Black Cat. I would prefer just comic book Black Cat. Not Black Cat. I don't know why I'm saying Black Cat. Catwoman.
Well, she's Catwoman and she's dressed in black, so
I've been reading Ultimate Spider-Man lately.
Hmm.
So that is probably why.
Ben Mendelsohn's American accent is a little rough in this movie. He's still given a good performance because it's Ben Mendelsohn, but I feel like he gets the American accent down a little better in Captain Marvel.
Yeah, and he's got way more personality in that. Well, I mean, he doesn't. He's not like a stick of wood in this movie. Like he's classic villainous business tycoon. But
Mm-hmm. And like speaking of voices, we'd already talked about how from Begins to The Dark Knight, like the Batman voice had clearly like gotten exaggerated and was a little too much. It's really too much in this movie.
it's hysterical. Like it is more make funnable than it ever has been.
And like the problem is even more than just the voice itself and like the way that it always looks a little like Christian Bale always looks a little silly trying to maintain the voice because it always leaves him kind of like in this mouth breather look. But
He's got his mouth, yeah, protruding a certain way. It's
yeah, and like we keep giving him like banter dialogue with Catwoman, and that voice is not suited to banter. It's like Christian Bale is having a hard time getting his mouth around the lines while maintaining the voice. Although I will say I liked Bane's face or like Bane's eyes. You can see even Bane is like, "What am I looking at?" When he sees the bat, he's like, "I didn't know he had one of those." Do you have any thoughts about the clean slate thing? Because I feel like it
I
should bother me.
Okay, hold on. This is the joke. It does not. No, I'm sorry. No, it doesn't even. It doesn't make sense for him to talk to himself in a Batman voice.
Yeah, no. Like, why? Why?
Yep, he's with Alfred, and yeah, he's back to being Bruce Wayne. I don't know why he was talking to himself in a Batman voice. Um, but yeah. So the clean slate thing, I'm conflicted on it because we have a not good and a kind of we have a mixed track record in the comics with Catwoman as far as right skirting the line of her being like genuinely caring about Batman and like turning over a new leaf and helping him versus maintaining being a femme fatale and going back to the being a thief thing. And we hopscotch back and forth so much. And for this movie, for the majority of it, it's clear that well, maybe not clear, but I would say this is not a person that is immediately won over and wants to. Actually, yeah, I would go as far as saying that's clear. Now that I think about it, um, this is not a person that wants to, because they just haven't had enough time together. This is a person that immediately wants to turn over a new leaf and be with him and help him in his mission. Um, the clean slate thing I'd be more okay with she if we had history with this Catwoman and like those two had a history and she decided she wanted to be with him, then I could get behind the clean slate thing. But because we literally just met this character, and as far as I can tell, despite how dangerous it is, she sort of likes being a thief. Um, I don't. It's not a plot line I really care for.
Well, I think the idea is less that she wants the clean slate necessarily as a way to like start over and stop being a thief. She just wants to get the heat off of herself, and that I think tracks. But again, like with the leg thing, the fact that it's so like things being up to interpretation isn't a bad thing. But you're right in that it's a matter of spending more time with this character to get a sense of which one it is. Because I take it to be she wants the clean slate because she's got too many people on her. She just wants to be able to sort of like make a clean getaway. But it could be what you're saying, and it could be like, all right, I want to turn over a new leaf, and that's what this is for.
Yeah, I just think that's a problem. That should be made clear. Like this is a big plot point. This is her motivating factor. This is what she wants. You should make it clear as to why she wants it. Um,
Especially since
this
it's like from her first scenes, it's her motivation, seemingly.
yeah. This is one of my least favorite scenes in the whole movie.
Yeah, I don't like this. And like Bruce's reaction to this news doesn't seem in character or appropriate.
Um, well, first of all, I do kind of agree with Eric when he says, like, on the page, it sounds like he's lying.
Mm-hmm.
What if Rachel wrote this letter, and what if I burnt? Like, why would you even word it like that?
It's this thing of like, especially when writing for Alfred, they seem to enjoy this sort of like really roundabout, not cryptic, but kind of flowery way of writing these characters. And that's always been a part of these movies, but in here in particular, it's like, just say what you mean.
Yeah, we don't always have to try to be thematic through the voice of the characters.
And like poetic and stuff.
Yeah. So that scene really does not work at all. It's just a really ham-fisted and forced way to get Alfred out of the movie.
Yeah, and honestly, it feels kind of weird to take him out because he's gonna leave, and then that's gonna be it until near the end. He's gonna be out of this movie for pretty much the rest of it. And I'm not 100% sure that getting rid of him was necessary.
Well, I get it if this is the third movie where it's like we want to really make our hero the underdog. We want to strip everything from him. He loses his money. He loses Wayne Enterprises. He loses most of his tech to Bane. Um, so I understand like wanting to take everything from him and dragging him to literal rock bottom and see how he gets out of it. Um, that's a compelling story arc to have him go through. It's just not executed well at all.
Hmm. And again, I didn't even realize this like last night, but just how little Miranda Tate had been in the movie before Bruce is like okay and trusting her with this. Like, this feels forced.
Yeah, which is weird given how long this movie is. We're already an hour in, and they only had one scene together prior to this.
And to
Um,
be fair, he is just entrusting her with the energy saving stuff. But
yep.
even for someone who had mothballed this project for years prior to this movie, and then he's like, Miranda Tate seems like a good one. Let's let her take care of it. Let's bring her on to be my proxy for the company, pretty much. Could have used more time to make that feel earned.
Yeah. And then he just has her sit on it. It's so weird for him to just flat out give up on this. And well, weirder still is to make him recluse. Like that's the big thing that I hate about this movie. Um, so he had a plan for trying to make the world better as Bruce Wayne. It didn't work. So I'm just gonna mothball it, come up with nothing else, and just become a recluse.
And another problem with the scene he just had with Alfred is like the implication that that scene makes that all of this is because he lost Rachel, and he's like, well, I don't have a life with her to fall back on. Like, what's the point in doing anything? That that doesn't work because that's not the emotional place that he was at in The Dark Knight, where it's like he had a
Yeah, like
moment.
he still went and I mean I get it, there was an immediate threat, so like he couldn't really stop to grieve, like he had to keep dealing with Joker. Um
Yeah, but even if he were grieving, it doesn't seem from that movie that he'd be like, oh, well, the life that we could have had together isn't on the table anymore because she's dead. I guess I might as well just not bother with anything anymore like that. For that to be the thing that's made him this way for 8 years doesn't work.
that doesn't work, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Because if that really is the case, then why would he bother even trying to get that energy project off the ground in the first place? This is interesting. This
Yeah.
back and forth. This is one of my favorite moments with Bane in the movie, where he was like, "Do you feel in charge?"
Yeah, I love the like I paid you and that gives you power over me. It's like there is interesting stuff here in terms of like Bane is a complete anarchist and he does not believe in like any sanctity in money. And so like this guy who's just a sleazy businessman and thinks that everything is dependent on who's paying whom. And that like, all right, I paid you, so like I own you pretty much. And Bane's like, no, I took your money and now I'm gonna do what I want.
We have to. Well, I say we. They have to radically rewrite this movie, to make Bane. First of all, I think we should. Like, this is part of the retroactively trying to make this feel like a planned out trilogy when it wasn't. Even making Bane involved with the League of Assassins.
Yep.
Um, just annex that entirely. He can still have a militia and like goons that work for him. Take out the League of Assassins arc, give him an actual compelling backstory, one unique and befitting to him, and just give us a movie with him and Catwoman. You don't need this League of Assassins, Ra's al Ghul nonsense.
Yeah, just take
Especially
Talia
because
just have Bane's like whole thing be sincere. And like I'm sure that on some level Bane believes some of the things that he's saying in regards to class and all that. But
it doesn't really even matter if he believes that or not, or even if the people believe that or not, because he's just propagating that to buy time until the bomb goes off. Like, it doesn't ultimately matter. None of that class stuff matter because they're all gonna die. And
yeah,
like Bane is not going to, like, the end game is still to blow up Gotham regardless of what happens. So all this talk about class means absolutely nothing.
you could really tighten this movie up, like thematically and just in terms of runtime, if Bane is just his own man, like with a mission to sort of like societally overthrow Gotham, and Talia and the League of Shadows just isn't involved at all, and that more cleanly ties Bane and Catwoman together, as opposed to the final product of this movie, where outside of the scenes where they are on screen together, it feels like they're just off in separate orbits, not relating to each other at all. And like
And they
this,
don't necessarily have to be related, but
just in the
the
sense that
thing,
like, why are they both in this movie together?
yeah, so Um, crap, I forgot my the point that I was going to make. Oh, yeah. So with the League of Assassins,
Mm.
um, they're an organization that shapes the world how they see it through it be plague or famine or assassinations, what have you. Um, they Talia wants to blow up Gotham. She wants, obviously, the majority of her people, Bane and her, to be there when the freaking bomb goes off. Um, First of all, it's weird that, like, they see Bane as a messianic figure and they're willing to die for him, and we don't really know what he actually believes in, um, because he's just acting as the face for the League of Assassins when it's really just Talia the whole time. Um, and that should be explained. Furthermore, um, the League as an entity is not, like, they're not. It's the I've never seen this before, but it's like undermining an entire terrorist group. So, like, actual terrorists, they have suicide bombers and stuff, right?
Mhm.
Not the entire group would commit suicide just to take out one area. You still have your leader or whoever still calling the shots, running things. Everyone in that group is not dying for the sake of the agenda. Some people are, not literally everyone.
Especially
Like
since,
Gotham is not the only crime-ridden place. That can't be the only goal of the league. Or it's like, oh, we're just gonna wipe out Gotham and that's it. We're just gonna die with Gotham. Still all this
yeah,
other crime and turmoil going on in the world, and we're just going to take out Gotham and die with Gotham because why?
yeah, exactly. That's like one of the bigger issues is the League of Shadows is supposed to be influencing the whole world, and yet for the purposes of this movie, it seems like Gotham is the end all be all.
For no
And
good reason.
yeah, honestly. Like the only reason is Gotham is the only location in which these movies take place, so the rest of the world is basically immaterial. But from what we know in the Batman Begins, it's not how it's supposed to be. Like, if not Talia herself, because maybe you could say, oh, she's got a personal grudge against Gotham and Bruce, and she wants to be there for when Bruce suffers. Fine, but Bane, and like you said, most of the league should still be like, all right, Gotham is a victory, but we've got other stuff to do.
So our previous two action scenes are kind of mediocre. This is um kind of the best action scene in the whole movie.
Yeah, I like this fight. Huh.
Um, like none of the action in this movie is, well, with the exception of this fight and some of the final fight with Bane, none of the action in this movie is particularly standout or memorable. But at least we've gotten away from the shaky cam of like two and a half of the first two movies.
Yeah. This feels very focused, and like you can actually see the choreography, and it's really brutal. And like, yeah, in terms of action, this is probably the peak of this movie.
And it's a really interesting choice to drop out the score
Mhm.
and just let them fight. Is one of the only major comic book movies I can think that even does this for a major climactic. Well, it's not the climax of the movie, but like for a pretty major fight, um, to drop out score and like not have any dramatic music playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the more impressive things about this is that you feel Bane's power and strength, despite the fact that he is not the superhuman that we made him in the comics.
Yeah.
This is still a human being, but he is still the peak of human strength and just physically just a more superior adversary to Batman than he's ever had to face before.
And this is a Batman who's not been like invincible in fights prior to this. Like he's been given trouble by people, but this is really the first time that someone has just so completely had the physical edge over him. And like he spent the entire fight on the back foot. That's not really happened before now.
And a lot of what Bane is saying here sounds really cool, but problem is we don't know how involved with the league he actually is, especially when he's thrown in the pit. That story revolves around Talia, and we're made to believe it revolves around Bane the entire time. Um, and we don't know what exactly, like, why was he too extreme exactly for Ra's al Ghul? We don't know his real, true ideology. Um, so pretty much all the rhetoric he's spouting amounts to nothing, and that's what sucks a lot of the gravitas out of this scene and what he's saying, because in the moment, this is really compelling.
Mm.
But ultimately, Bane as a villain is rendered to nothing because we don't really get to know anything about it. There really should have been, and I know Nolan is typically opposed to flashbacks, but there really should have been um, a scene where we got to see just how different he was to Ra's al Ghul and how he felt about the world versus him.
Yeah. And like all this
If you're
stuff,
if, like, I don't want Bane to be a member of the League of Assassins in the first place. Like, that's not even Bane to me. But if you're gonna do this interpretation, then you need to flesh it out more.
yeah, if you're gonna do that, then I think it's with this being the middle of the movie, and then by the end, Bane is so completely overshadowed. There's there's something here to like the whole "you adopted the dark, I was born in it" type thing of like Bruce in Begins crafted Batman to be this thing that was more like an idea than a man, and Bane is that to an extreme. Like without even trying, he's more of like a specter or an idea or a like a grand figure than a person. And so what does Bruce do when he's confronted with like the extreme version of what he meant Batman to be for other people? And there's bits of that in this fight, but then after that we just kind of drop it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if he really even is a symbol and an idea of what? Terrorism? Like, we don't know. Like, for as much speechifying and monologuing as he does, at the end of the day, we really don't know much of anything about Bane.
Yeah. In the end, he's basically just a proxy or like a patsy for Talia, and that's unfortunate because that leaves us. If Talia had been interesting, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation. But that leaves us with two villains who are basically just together and being well, not unmemorable in Bane's case, but like not really having any meat on their bones.
And even then, like, I definitely would have cried foul for neutering Bane just to give us a Talia. Like, you're
Yeah.
gonna completely take any of the teeth out of one of my favorite Batman villains for Talia? Really?
Hmm.
And she's not like what I would call a minor character. Like, she's the mother of Damian Wayne, Bruce Wayne's son, which he obviously didn't do in these movies. But um, like, I wouldn't have been okay with that regardless. Like, just tell a different story. Let Bane be the villain, and then I don't know. Once this trilogy's over, just make Batman movies and do stuff with Talia.
Yeah. Talia's not like she's not a bad character, but she's not someone that I'd try to make the main villain of one of these movies,
Yeah, no.
especially at the expense of someone else.
And I really think we should have left League of Assassins alone, like not even tried to bring that back. Uh, like the bigger issue is that we even have been involved with them at all. Um, but the main reason that's even brought back here is to try to close this out, make it feel like a trilogy. Um, I really feel like the League of Assassins is shoehorned into this movie, um, so that so that Christopher Nolan can close it out and make it a trilogy, and Warner Brothers can't strong arm him into trying to like make any more movies because he really wanted to be done with these and go out and start making his own stuff again.
And this is like the weird thing with this movie, and how I know for people who do enjoy this is gonna sound kind of like a nonsense argument because even to me it doesn't fully make sense, but we're at the halfway point pretty much. Bruce is in the cave now, and we've been talking about a lot of stuff, but it kind of feels like nothing has happened in this movie. Like Bruce just got his back broken, and that's a big deal. But despite the fact that we've been watching all this stuff take place, at the halfway point here, I kind of feel like we've been watching a bunch of nothing.
And I get why you're saying that, kind of. I can't really agree with it though, because like stuff has definitely happened, and we've dragged Bruce down pretty low. His company is in free fall and getting taken over. He lost all his money, or at least most of his money. Oh yeah, he pretty much lost all his money. Um,
He turned off his power.
yeah, turned off his power. He loses Alfred. He gets the living snot beat out of him. His back is broken. He's thrown into a prison that it's very unlikely that he can escape from, and the guy who put him there is going to like let him sit there in agony and watch as he tears his city apart. Like we systematically took Bruce to his lowest low, and that's not nothing. But our road getting there was pretty contrived and bland, and
Yeah, I think the thing might just be I didn't care about most of it.
yeah, like you don't have the investment in this situation, like in this story as it's happening, and so that's why it feels like nothing's happening. But stuff is definitely happening. It's just you weren't made to care like you were in those first two movies.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much going on in his eyes. Like it's crazy because like he acts most of this movie with just his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, his physical presence and posture and everything, but like um that's that's really impressive when you're an actor and like your main tool to convey emotion is your whole face, and he's doing so much with just his eyes.
Yeah.
This is also a pretty smart plan. I like this beat of Bane literally imprisoning all the cops.
Yeah.
That that feels like something you definitely see in a Batman story. It's like we remove cops from the equation because often like through Gordon, the cops are actually on his side and they don't interfere with his cases or when he's trying to take down criminals. Um, so to take them out of the equation entirely is pretty interesting. But we took Bruce out of the equation as well. Um, so this literally just becomes a really bland, nonsensical anarchy movie until we can finally put Bruce back in Gotham. And then it just becomes a mediocre superhero movie with a generic climax and a ludicrous ending.
Yeah. And right now, right here, is where Bruce should be asking what the chanting means.
Oh,
Not,
yeah, I hate that too.
yeah, not scenes later when he's about to get out. And he's like, what does a chanting mean? Boy, you've been here for a while yet. How has this question just now occurred to you?
And it's interesting because I I really like the whole thing of him having to find his fear of death again. He's put on this suit. He's kind of like in the back of his head, as Alfred says, he'd kind of be okay if he got killed being Batman again. Like he's just been waiting and waiting to for things to go bad again so he can, become Batman, put on the suit again. And that's finally happening. And he's so like because he's not what he was before. And even then, like this was not a completely invulnerable Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so like he's knocked down and he's got to find the strength to climb out of the pit, but that requires letting himself, at least mentally, be vulnerable in a way he wasn't before. It's like I'm not afraid to die, um, and that old man is like, you think that's what gives you strength? No, it makes you weak. And like that him having to be afraid is the reason why he's able to get out. I like that.
Yeah, and like as the end of this trilogy, that would be a really interesting idea again, because he made Batman to instill fear in people, and he's been rejecting his own fear this whole time. That would be a nice full circle sort of thing.
But yeah, as you said, the that really cutesy thing of him saving that question until the big climactic moment where he's finally able to get out, that's really lame.
Mm-hmm.
This whole villain plot, as I said earlier, really is just ill-conceived and dumb because, firstly, the League of Assassins, as like all of them, should not be willing to die for the sake of this bomb plan and take out Gotham. Like there's other crime-ridden areas in the world. Why are they so ready to die with Gotham? I don't understand it. Secondly, this I don't know why Bane even entertains the idea of um letting everyone run around and having all this anarchy and chaos when nothing they really do matters because they're all going to die anyway, no matter who's in quote unquote in charge, um, or giving power back to the little people or the oppressed or whatever. Um, they all die anyway. All of them go up with this bomb. So all his rhetoric, everything he's talking about with those people, none of that really amounts to anything or means anything. So I don't know why it's even when he could literally just be pointing guns at these people and waiting until the bomb goes off.
Yeah.
And see, this is solid. This feels like we're watching a solid detective movie with him as our main character.
Yeah. And like that bit where he like throws the gun away in disgust is like a little, it's a neat little, like, yeah, this guy's he's got Bruce's core in him, and he
Yeah.
like has a dislike of killing people.
Yep. And he had to do it. That was pure self-defense, but yeah, it's cool that there's that little nuance there.
Yeah, and you get the sense that he didn't even mean for it to be fatal, because he like was still gonna interrogate him and like ask him questions.
Yeah. There I don't know why. But when the mayor of Gotham dies here in this stadium, it felt like a scene out of Dark Knight, and it made me laugh.
This is that other thing. This is the other scene that I think of when it's like a Joker type scene of Bane has his plan, everyone is kind of unawares of it, and we're watching it get executed, and it doesn't have that same sort of mounting tension.
Oh, there's tension in this scene for sure. Um, I guess because I had seen the trailer and I knew this place was getting blown up already.
Hmm.
Like because Bane doesn't announce this. Like we don't know. Like if you don't see any previews for this movie, you don't inherently know this place is gonna blow up. Um, but actually, yeah, because like the only thing we know for sure is that they're gonna by the time this happens, we know that the police are gonna get sealed in. So we know he's gonna blow up columns below ground to trap the police. We don't know he's gonna blow up the stadium. Um, like you assume something bad's gonna happen, but you don't know for sure that's going to happen. Um, so yeah, that there's just something about like this scene. Well, less the like what happens to the football players and just blowing the mayor the way we do. It felt like Joker and Dark Knight again. And I remember some people staring at me in the theater because I just uncontrollably, I mean, it wasn't like heckling, but I did let out a burst of laughter when the mayor got blown up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we knew this was coming, didn't know the stadium would be blown up at the exact same time.
And like only one player managed to successfully get out alive.
Yeah,
So
that's a cool shot. That was one of my favorite shots in the trailer.
yeah.
I think because it was a oneer and it was uninterrupted. I wish it was uninterrupted in the actual movie.
Yeah.
I always have an appreciation for solid one takes. Um, there's one in the most recent James Bond film that really sticks out to me. There's like I really like whenever we do one takes.
Hmm.
And I just we've talked about this at length already before, but um all of I don't understand why he even entertains this. Um actually he's not doing the anarchy thing yet. He's just like go to your homes. Yeah,
I guess
that's
this is part of that thing that they talked about, like with the hole and making the jump, where it's like if you give them hope, then that's gonna make their eventual downfall all the worse. So he gives them like the hope of, okay, one of you citizens has the trigger, when really, like as we know, he slash Talia have control the whole time. It's like, okay, if we make it feel like you, the people, are kind of in control of the situation in a roundabout way, then it's gonna hurt all the more when the thing blows up and you're all caught in it.
this is a really intense scene.
Mm-hmm. I like in a second when Gordon gets a drop on him.
Yeah, this is one of the only times in the whole movie I actually cheered.
Mm.
Yeah, this is so Gordon. Yeah, all of this is just to give them hope, but it what's really obnoxious about it is we try to because the movie, like as you said, like kind of sets up the big class thing, and Bane is playing into that, but we don't know how he can't actually care one way or the other because he knows they're all going to die regardless, and we don't know how the people feel about it.
Yeah, and like regardless of the hope element of it, it's still like I feel like the panic that is created by just this bomb being here is gonna overshadow any kind of hope that you would give them of like, oh well, one of you has the trigger. That's not. I don't think that's gonna have the effect on people that Bane assumes it would have.
Especially because the average person is not a suicide bomber.
Mm-hmm.
Like as unfortunate as it is, and not to get too political, but a school shooter is a far cry from a suicide bomber. Like even if you gave the remote to one of the people, why would they want to die? Why would the average person just want to die for no reason?
Well, I mean, to be fair, they do live in Gotham. I'm sure the impulse strikes them regularly.
But to take literally the entire city with you, and there's like no one that you care about in Gotham, really. Like I get if you have like a terrible life, but like you don't have any family or a girlfriend or friends or anyone that you would feel just a little bad about also taking with you.
Yeah, and like the thing I feel like we're talking around is just from a writing perspective, this feels like the one wrinkle too many, like unnecessary. Like I don't think the movie would be any worse if he just got rid of this idea and he was just like, "We got a bomb. I got the trigger. You've got like a couple months. Go nuts."
Yeah, I mean, I hate the bomb plot anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's always funny, like also being in military and seeing people in the military in movies and something just being really off about their uniforms. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying these are inaccurate at the time, but I, I'm pretty sure that's definitely not what Army is wearing now.
Yeah, now that you say that, even I'm trying to think if I've ever seen that on a person. I don't think so.
This is this is the big test for us, the big trial of trying to find something to talk about for the rest of this movie.
Well, okay, I've got a thing, which is either it was just said or it's going to be said in a minute, which is the president's like our country's best city or something to that effect. Like, really, that's Gotham? Gotham is like the city on a hill.
Supposedly the most crime-ridden city in the country. Like Gotham is their Chicago, and really, that's your best city. That's like the most like tone deaf like PR statement I can think of.
Hmm. And yeah, here we go. So we've got people like the press here, the broadcasting what Bane is saying, and Gordon's watching, and like putting aside that again, this is the first time that Harvey's coming up since like the opening 10 minutes of this movie. This whole thing feels really shoehorned just to tie it back to the Dark Knight.
That's
Like,
not necessarily fair because the Dent Act is brought up like three times after that. It's brought up when I'm forgetting his name, but the detective guy that's in the room with Gordon right now. He brings it up when they're on the roof of the police station and
oh yeah, that's
Gordon's looking, yeah, reminiscing it about the bat signal. And he brings it up again when he talks to Bruce and lets him know that he was Batman. Um, like the Dent Act keeps getting brought up. It's like
mm,
people still value that and the fact that like Dent was able, like through Dent, all these criminals were able to get put away.
that's true.
Yeah, so
But
we,
again,
but regardless, we undermine it here.
yeah, and like it's another thing of like even as it gets brought up, it feels weird that suddenly it's a thing that Bane is pretending to care about. Even, but like that aside, like again, we get shots of reactions from Gordon, and we get reactions from the prisoners. What do the regular people think about this?
Exactly. Yeah. Of course, like the people who've been incarcerated over it are going to be up in arms because um like they couldn't have been locked up otherwise, or at least most of them wouldn't have been locked up otherwise. But like for your average law-abiding citizen, like what do they think? We should know, like especially for something so grounded, we need to know like what the people on the ground think about what's going on here.
Yeah.
I hate this so much.
The people.
The people, Gotham is yours. Do as you please. None shall interfere.
Yeah, this whole like Gotham City oppresses you and like keeps you down. It's not jiving. It's not coming together.
All the corrupt people. Take them from their decadent nests. They'll be cast out into the cold and endure. And it's like, that's so bogus. Like, all of these law abiding people are corrupt.
Yeah, like we just released a bunch of prisoners, okay, and Bane has like his guys. I guess we have to assume that the actual oppressed individuals of Gotham are like on board for this. Like, I guess that's what this is supposed to be conveying to us, but that doesn't seem like the city that we saw previously.
Even Selena Kyle is down with this, and that doesn't make sense to me. Like, later, Bruce shows up and she's like, maybe the city doesn't need saving. Maybe I like it this way. And I'm like, really? Do you? Like,
Well, I
what?
think that she's lying when she says that, and like we got that little reaction shot of her that's like, well, maybe I'm down for this, but maybe not. And like, really, it's her blonde friend who I forget if she has a name, but who's like, yeah, this is great. And I don't know, is she supposed to be like our
She
proxy
tells
for?
her, but she goes as far as also telling her, this is what you wanted.
Yeah, and there's an interesting bit with them later where they're in like a house that's like been emptied out, and Selena's like, this is someone's house, and her friend is like, no, this is everyone's house. Like, this is what you wanted, right? Everything to be up for grabs. And you can see on her face, it's like, okay, maybe I do believe in some sort of societal sanctities and like rights to own certain things. But like, I don't know, is the blonde friend supposed to be like what the actual impoverished majority of Gotham are like? Like, are they
And
down?
this is where, yeah, this is where Nolan really needs to. Oh, Nolan and the writers in general need to pull their heads out of their, you know what's, and realize that there's a very, very fine line between um, holding the audience's hand and just, well, I mean, not even a fine line, but there's a difference between holding the audience's hand and being obnoxiously vague,
Mm-hmm.
or not holding their hand and being obnoxiously vague, I should say.
Yeah, like I get wanting to leave certain things to interpretation and trusting your audience, but at some point you can't just have the main characters talk about societal change and like what the society at large is supposed to be like. You've got to show us people on the ground reacting to stuff. And like I think that's what that montage was supposed to be, but again, I don't really know how much of it is regular Gothamites or Bane's people or prisoners or criminals or just like what are like regular working class Joe Schmoes in Gotham doing like? Because Selena and her friend, they have to steal like all the time just to get by. And I'm assuming that most people in Gotham aren't doing that. So really, we have no voice for the average citizen in this movie.
Yeah, and that's really frustrating.
Hmm. And it's dream sequence time. Where I don't
And
know if I have like a huge problem with this, but I don't think it's necessary. Where this is like Bruce's excuse to go like, you were the mercenary that they talked about in the story, and this is what Bane is planning. I think he could have. I think Bruce could have come to that conclusion, like in dialogue with the other guy who fixes his back. I'm not really sure what the point is of having like Roz show up as a hallucination, just so Bruce can be like, "Oh, this is what's happening."
Okay, so I think there's two big reasons that we do this. A, this is one of the big moments where we do hold the audience's hand, where it's like Bruce is seeing a hallucination of Roz to put two and two together, and B, we do this to really like to round off the series and make this feel like a trilogy. We're doubling down on the trilogy thing, and so we do this hallucination to make this feel like a full story kind of thing, a full circle kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, it's another one of those kind of cheap moves that feels like this doesn't really enhance the story here, and it doesn't entirely make sense. But having Roz on screen, quote unquote, will feel cathartic to people who've been following since Begins.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
some.
for as long as this movie is, there's really not enough discussion on things that matter.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, she seems conflicted there. We should be talking about this more.
Yeah, like I like that bit, and I wish we'd gotten more of it. Of where it's like, oh, maybe when I wanted like this big storm to like sweep over everything, I didn't take into account that it wasn't just the rich people in the ivory tower who were gonna get their lives upended. Like as much as it sucks, the way that society works is that you knock over the board and everyone kind of suffers. And if this is a status quo now, this is not what Selena Kyle wanted to happen. But just it's lots of little things, and we should have had more of a concrete discussion from her, probably with Bruce, but it could have been with anyone of just like, now this is not what I wanted things to be. And like maybe even my philosophy needs to have some moderation to it.
Um, and the reason why I think that the clean slate thing is definitely she wants to, like, you know, she's actually thinking about stopping being a criminal thing. Is because when Bruce finally gets back, he tells her, like, for you, this isn't just this isn't just a I forget exactly what the terminology is, but he's like, you want to disappear and start fresh. And
Mm.
she doesn't at all protest to that. So I think that's really what it is, and I hate this so much.
Bruce,
Realistic and grounded. He just broke his back, and then he falls on that rope the way he does, and he shouldn't be able to function at all for, like, that's a one big leap backwards, right? That's not a few steps. That's a giant leap backwards. All the process he made with his back and finally even being able to walk again.
yeah, and also that jump sucked. Bruce, you didn't even get a running start. You just hopped off.
Yeah. Like, we didn't even make it look like he tried.
Honestly.
Like, that got past no one. I can't imagine Christopher Nolan looking at the dailies for this movie, getting to that scene, and he's like, "Oh yeah, perfect. Next scene." I'm like,
Especially
really?
immediately afterward, we show the visual of the kid making the jump, Talia, and she gets a running start. And granted, the kid is small and like the platform is small, but there's enough space there that you can step back like 4 or 5 steps and then run so that you can have some momentum and you're not just doing a little hop. But if he did that,
What's really weird is we do the same thing when he actually makes the jump. He doesn't at
Exactly.
all go around the start. He just hops again and conveniently makes it.
Ugh, so weird.
Yeah. There's an actor here. I don't know if you remember him or not. You probably don't. Um, he gets like a few blink and you miss it uh, cameos because he's essentially an extra in this movie. His name is Ian Bowen. He played Peter Hale in Teen Wolf, Derek's uncle. I loved him in that show. He was a great villain, and um, it's another one of this movie sends is criminally underusing him because I know him. He's a great actor. Um, he's more than an extra. Like you give him a speaking role, something. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure he shows up in one of these scenes when they're tailing the trucks.
Mm.
This guy, he's definitely not the same guy, but he looks very similar to the guy from Matrix Reloaded that has an axe to grind with Morpheus and is really headstrong. He's like the general. You know what I'm talking
I
about?
would not remember that because I have not watched the latter two Matrix movies in like years.
That's unfortunate.
Just no respect at all for Blake.
That guy's special forces, yeah, I don't buy it. When
Ah,
he tried running and shooting like that, yeah, no, I don't buy it.
nice.
That cannot be pleasant.
Jeez, you might as well just shoot him. Like, come on.
And I don't like that. I'm gonna
Which,
destroy my only means of keeping up to date with what's going on in Gotham.
oh, yeah, that's dumb. You can't even say, like, oh, well, I've seen all I needed to see. No, the situation could change at any moment, Bruce. You know, I'm wondering, so, like, how does this work? Do they, like, announce in advance that they're gonna go up and then the others start the chanting? Because, like, did Bruce or somebody tell everyone else in the prison, like, hey, he's gonna try going up again? Also, we do that thing that kind of annoys me sometimes in movies where this guy was speaking his native tongue and had to be translated for a couple of scenes, and then he suddenly starts speaking English, and it's like perfect fluent English.
Huh.
It's like, why didn't you just start like that? And why isn't he and the guy who's like working on Bruce's back? They could be the same character.
I guess that is true. But we're having him speak in English here because he's delivering the big dramatic dialogue that's going to propel Bruce to actually succeed.
Hmm.
And we want that to resonate with the audience. So that's the moment where we're going to have him start talking in English. The chant itself became weirdly iconic. Like they were using it to market the movie. Like the chanting shows up in most of the trailers, even most of the TV spots.
It was definitely a meme for a while there.
Of course, we gotta add bats. That's not even an actual complaint, but
Bruce, start from the back and run. Like I don't understand. Like in terms of the blocking or what. Like why is it like this?
yeah, why would you shoot it like that? And I get why we cut when we were doing the flashback with Talia. Um, for Bruce's big dramatic scene where he does it, I don't even understand why we cut. It feels like they just wanted him to leap off and not get a running start, so they cut and then cut again where he catches the edge.
Yeah. And here's our requisite brief scene from Scarecrow.
Yeah, essentially a glorified cameo. Um, I this is a really weird and messed up way to kill people.
Yeah. Like I'll say what for just being a cameo, Cillian Murphy's still clearly having fun and like he's entertaining.
Yeah, he's chewing the scenery for what little he has.
I was sold to the man in the cold sweat.
Yeah, that's awful.
You can't catch a break. Like if you're not dying by falling into ice, you're dying and then turning into a zombie and then being atomized.
At that point I'm like just shoot me. Like I'm not drowning in freezing cold water.
No. That's one of the worst ways. I just take the bullet, honestly.
This is semi decent setup and payoff, but I don't really like what happened to him ultimately. Um, like I don't, you know me, I kind of hate. I don't hate it, but I'm all for movies that don't have happy endings, especially these kind of movies where we all expect the hero to win at the end and everyone like he gets the girl and everything goes well and the villain's dead and whatever. Um, but like to Gordon, our he's certainly the most morally compromised that we've ever seen him before. Um, but like for him to push Foley so hard into getting back in and trying to help him take back the city, and Foley, denies it and decides to, just stay with his family and wait it out. The thing that gets him back in is seeing the Batman symbol, knowing that they have Batman in their corner. But like for him to just, die and then have a pretty silly death pose,
Yeah,
um,
that's really
I thought
unfortunate.
was really insulting.
And like
And
it
like,
sucks
what are
because
we like? We were rewarding the an act of bravery with you get to die, and he's not even that major of a character.
yeah, and like this is something that I've been thinking about a little more as I've like seen videos to talk about it and stuff. It is a little bit of an odd fixation that we have, particularly in Western culture and like our fiction, of like a good death being its own reward. And it's like I've never felt entirely comfortable with that notion. And for as much as I'm very careful to separate the presence of the police in this movie from what we've been talking about, which is the lack of any just normal working class, just 9 to 5 person citizen in Gotham and like their voice. Foley's like the one guy we see who's got a family, who's got a home life, who has something to live for beyond all this mess. And to have him be the one who dies at the end is like it feels kind of gross and wrong of like Gordon really shouldn't have pushed him into like his one. Okay, yeah, you can always say like one man could turn the tide of any conflict, but in the end, was Foley needed? Was his death
No,
necessary? No.
it really wasn't. Like everything, it's one person, and given how this, how this whole big climax plays out, he was not needed. It'd be one thing if like in the confusion he somehow saves Gordon or like saves somebody or does something like major. What if like he's actually the one to kill Bane? Like he shoots Bane or something.
Yeah,
It's
that would
not
be
even
great.
Batman. Yeah. But
But
he
instead, it's
does
this weird
nothing.
kind of like martyr culture thing that we have of like you
That's him.
died.
That's Ian Bowen.
Oh, sorry,
He
what'd you
he
say?
he was Ian Bowen. He was standing to the left of Gordon when he was showing him the radio.
Ah, okay. But yeah, it's this weird like martyr culture thing we have of like you died in service of the cause, and that by itself makes it worth it and honorable. And I'm like, I'd honestly rather the guy just get to go back to his wife and kid
Yeah.
and be specific because they're gonna. Yeah,
It's like,
no, we
what
gotta.
message are you sending to your audience that like, do the right thing, kids? You'll die.
Yeah, like if you're the only person in the story who has any other thing to live for besides like this whole conflict, well, forget that. That's not as important as giving your life to the big thing. But yeah, no, Gordon, you should have specified the way that you wanted to die because I mean, look who you're talking to. He's like the biggest troll, pretty much.
uh, Not that it even really matters, but you were you at all suspecting the big twist with Talia on first viewing? Do you even remember?
No, because again, this is like Miranda Tate is such a non-presence. It's like I didn't expect her to be important at all. So I guess on that level it was a nice surprise, but still it's like, oh, well, okay. I wish that the person who turned out to be the villain was a character that I was interested in, but
Yeah.
you caught me off guard, I guess.
Yeah, congratulations. You neutered Bane, and your story is pretty mediocre and lackluster. But at least I was surprised by your villain. It's not compelling.
That's the thing that
And then
people at Disney of doing so much now, where it's like their villains always got to be a twist, even if it means they're less interesting than when we just had the villain be the person who was doing the villainous stuff from the beginning.
yeah, like she's not even a villain until that twist.
Mm,
Our villain for the majority of this movie is Bane, and then we just undermine it with her, and she's awful.
yeah. And like we'll get to specific things, but like her performance isn't even that great.
God, I hate the autopilot thing. Ugh.
Okay, so like this is where I start to sort of like, well, I don't even want to say start to, because it happens throughout this movie where like I zone out because I'm just not interested. Why did he remove the autopilot?
Um, like we're talking over that previous scene, so I don't know, but oh, he takes the guidance mount. Um, but is that does that mean that the bat now can't do autopilot?
That
Because the
seems
setup of the autopilot doesn't even work anyway.
okay. All right, okay. So it's just like an unfortunate, like we need a reason for Batman to sacrifice himself. So let's just see that, I guess.
Yeah, because there is no I fixed the autopilot thing. Like, because like at the beginning of the movie, um, like Bruce asks about the autopilot, and Fox is like, "That's what you're there for." And as cool as it is, um, like for him to set up this whole symbol with the fire, it's like you're really taking the time to be all theatrical and dramatic when there's a bomb in play, and you don't know that Bane seeing this isn't going to immediately make him set the bomb off because you're announcing that you've arrived back into Gotham, and he says if anyone comes in or tries to leave, he'll make sure the bomb goes off. How do you know that doing this won't make Bane just blow everyone up?
Yeah, that really is like a thing to consider. If he's like, no one in or out, or I'm gonna set it off. And then Batman's like, let me make a big announcement of the fact that I came back in. And he's just real lucky that Bane's like, oh, well, you violated the rules. Blow up time.
Yeah, it's that really annoying like out of character thing where it's like he knows it's the plot armor thing of like he knows he's in a movie and he knows he's gonna win.
Yeah.
This is one of the cute little comedy gags that I like coming up here. Like he beats up all these guys, and the detective's like, "You missed a spot," and then he just kicks another guy in the face.
Right, but Blake
Yes,
doesn't have anyone close to him in this movie that we know of. It's like, who would he be protecting with the mask?
that's true. Um, but the mask is as much a symbol to intimidate and inspire as it is to keep his loved ones safe.
Yeah, I wish we talked about it like that though, instead of just focusing on the loved ones thing.
That's true.
Like Blake did, he doesn't have any like non-professional relationships in this movie.
You were right. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is such a boon to this movie.
Yeah, honestly.
Selena Kyle is my favorite character in Batman mythos aside from Batman himself, and I'm really hoping that for the Batman, she, because like she's not like uninteresting here, but we don't do enough with her. Um,
Yeah. Like she doesn't quite get lost in the shuffle, but it's like a close call. In the Batman, I hope that Catwoman is able to more efficiently stand out next to Riddler and Penguin and whoever else is going to show up.
and that was inspired casting.
What, Zoe
Um,
Kravitz?
yeah, Zoe Kravitz.
Mm.
I guess this is as good a place as any to just now that we're on the topic of mantles and people who have portrayed Catwoman over the years. Um, Christian Bale is still your favorite Batman, right? Because I mean, despite how obnoxiously hammy and silly his performance as Batman comes across in this film, he's still my favorite person to ever portray the character in live action.
I'll say he's my favorite live action. Kevin Conroy is still the definitive one for me.
Me as well. I even got to meet him. I have a picture with him, like an official framed picture, and he signed my copy of Arkham Knight.
Nice.
Really cool that the guy is as old as he is and is still heavily dedicated to the fans and even still taking up pretty much every opportunity. Like, every time somebody offers him to like voice the character again, he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." And like the see, this is the thing. Like you can't. I mean, I hate this whole bomb plot anyway. And I don't have a good answer for what he uses instead of the bat to get the bomb out of the city. Um, and if we're being grounded, the fallout kills everyone in Gotham anyway. But um, the like I really would have liked if we actually took everything from Batman and he and the police have to fight Bane, his army, and three Batmobiles, and Bruce does not have all of his original tech.
Yeah.
He's not using most of his tech anyway. Like he literally flies around with the bat, fights Bane, and then flies the bomb out again. Yeah, like here, Batman's about to show up, start fighting Bane. But it would have been nice if this actually felt um, like a genuine underdog. Like he has nothing up his sleeve aside from
Yeah.
like he's literally just a guy in a suit. Um, I mean, which is what he is for this fight. Like none of his gadgets come up because they're fighting in broad daylight, so like he can't be relying on the darkness, even though you know that wasn't helping him last fight anyway. But I don't know. You get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And like, you came back to die with your city. No, I came back to stop you. Is an exchange
So
that I.
cringy. It literally feels like 7-year-olds action figure dialogue.
Yeah, that's another thing where it's like that would be at home in a Joel Schumacher movie. It's like there's a time and a place for that kind of like dialogue, and it's not one of these movies.
Oh, and also we talked over it, but that shot with Miranda Tate just ominously like looking down at what's happening. She didn't even look like she's being held prisoner there. Um, I'm like, why did you guys kind of hint at it? Like, why would you hint at it at all?
Like
That
interesting retroactive foreshadowing, I guess.
yeah, that's weird. Like we're about to get the reveal in like 5.5 minutes. Like, why are you doing that?
I guess just to see if anyone picks up on it. I don't know. And again, like a good point that I've seen being raised is like, all right, if we want Bruce to be a little bit OP, then okay, why doesn't he have any of his gadgets with him? It's weird even for this Batman who's very, very physical, for his like last sort of gasp to be a fist fight without any kind of like there's no cleverness here. Bruce is just punch harder.
Yeah, he just beats him. Well, I mean, he goes for the mask this time, which is what he didn't do beforehand. But like, I mean, that's not interesting or clever. It's just, yeah, hit the thing that is
Attack weak
holding back
point
the
for
thing.
damage.
Yeah, it's literally like it's the boss fight that you've played 100 times in video games based on this kind of material.
Yeah, and like having Bane be like he's getting angry and he's resorting to brute force and just like aggro, that would work for maybe a version of Bane, but not this one who's been so like, oh, I'm
And calculating, and
yeah,
yeah,
and like
even
I
though he's a calculated fighter, there's even a line in their first fight where he's like, "You fight like a younger man, nothing held back. It's admirable, but mistaken."
yeah, and like what? Like his mask breaks and he gets like it hurts his face and that makes him angry, so he just forgets all that? Okay, I guess. Like there's
Well,
just
like if you're in pain, you're not going to be thinking clearly. So I buy that, but it's not satisfying.
yeah. There's really nothing cathartic about this as compared to him beating Joker or him beating Roz because those come with like real philosophical moral victories attached. And here it's just he and Bane had punch contest and he won.
Yeah, and we don't know Bane's philosophy. He does not have one.
Hmm.
I wish this is like one of the most by the numbers plots, and I hate everything with Talia. And why do we? It feels so like beneath Nolan and Goyer and the team that's been doing those first two movies to do this. Like we're building to this big twist, and it's so ludicrous.
Yeah.
Not that I don't like Ty being able to make the climb and all that. That's whatever. But like changing the backstory of Bane to be her backstory, and Bane, like, I don't know. It's weird. We're really vague about it. We don't know if there was like a father daughter, like Joel and Ellie type relationship, or was it like, like super messed up, like pedophilia kinda or whatever. But we don't know what the heck is going on. And it's it's just it's so
And
bizarre. Like
also just the execution of this, where it's like I get it, she just stabbed Bruce, she thinks he's about to die, but even with that, like again, we're getting too poetic and too talky, where it's like she's like, here, let me explain my and Bane's backstory, and then I'll eventually connect it to why I'm targeting you in Gotham. And it's like that feels really obligatory and like for the audience. And it's like explaining the twist when you'd really be better off just not having a twist.
Yeah, they should not have done this. Talia should not have been here. There was no
Mm-hmm.
reason to make this a red herring. She's not even in the movie enough for me to be like emotionally like hurt. Like I don't feel bad for Bruce. Like, I mean, it's like yeah, they just messed around and like ended up sleeping together, but like I don't buy that he like they don't spend enough time together for him to fall in love with her. Not that they even play it that way, but
Yeah,
um
him sleeping with her felt so obligatory, like it was supposed to be the thing that made this a big deal. And it's like we barely know this chick.
yeah. Like we play her as a good person, so it's a good red herring, but I'm not invested. Like I don't care. I don't care at all.
Yeah, this is like the prime example of what they say is like a twist without any kind of like real relevance. It's like you get the momentary shock, but then once that wears off, you have nothing. And that's what this is. It's like the first time you see it, it's like, oh snap, she was a bad guy? And then you get that for like 2 minutes, and then it's okay, now what? There's nothing left to justify that decision beyond just, oh man, it's a surprise.
And I don't know, especially when like they're in scenes that Bruce isn't in. I don't know why she's even keeping up the facade of being Miranda Tate. In scenes where she's with Bane, and Bane and his goons are like terrorizing the board of directors and like
Lucius? Well, I guess Lucius is there, so I don't know. He might tell
forcing
Bruce.
Lucius. But that's the thing. She doesn't, at least as far as we know, she doesn't know about Lucius, and he helps Batman. Because if she did know about that, I don't know why she's even keeping him alive, or why she hasn't had Bane like interrogate him or kill him.
Yeah, that would be like that would put Bruce at a real disadvantage.
Yeah. So I don't think she knows about Fox. So the fact that she's keeping up the facade of being Miranda Tate in scenes where she doesn't even have to is really dumb. Like
Hmm.
once Bruce is taken down and is out of the city, why is she even keeping up the facade? Like once Bruce is taken down and Bane has taken over the city and has captured the board of directors, why is she still pretending to be Miranda Tate? There's no
Yeah.
good reason for that other than we need the twist to happen, the climax of the movie.
Hmm.
Oh,
Take
and this
cover.
awful. This is so disrespectful. He's dead and his like he's in like the stupid, silly, like it's not quite Family Guy bad where he's
I
like
was gonna
contorted,
say. Ugh.
but he's still in like the goofiest like death position, and it's really insulting.
And now Bane's done. Just take him out of the movie. But yeah, also like I said before, like way back, Talia stabbed him, and we make like a big deal in the scene, and like Bale is playing it like it really really hurts, and now that scene's done, so he might as well have not been stabbed.
Yep, he's Wolverine now. All that groundedness that we've been hammering in so hard is just completely gone.
Hmm.
And see, that's the thing. They've done this to themselves. Like Batman, he himself is a human being, but he exists, at least in the comics anyway, exists in a heightened world where you've got the Titan formula, you've got Mr. Freeze, you've got all these crazy, superpowered, like heightened characters, and like we don't obviously like the grounded thing is not a thing within the comics. Like things are allowed to be exaggerated and heightened and not necessarily real world. Um, that's a choice he made for these movies. And when you double down on that, especially in your second film, because coming out of Begins, there's no reason that we still can't have villains like Mr. Freeze and um, the more like exaggerated characters like Man Bat and that kind of thing. Like
Yeah,
I could have seen us because much like the first Iron Man movie, I could have seen us getting to more supernatural stuff.
yeah.
And like
Something of
not even
that.
necessarily supernatural, but like it's so weird that this movie in some ways, just in presentation, if nothing else, feels more heightened and silly and over the top than the previous two, but it's not in the ways that feel justified. And like, I'd have preferred, like you said, if we got more like straightforward, like Venom formula Bane played in a grounded ish way as opposed to like fundamentally changing that character completely for the sake of the groundedness while also still being in this movie that has so much silliness in it, not in a good way.
Yeah, like unintentionally so. And I will say, as impressive as it is that all of this, looks real, um, it's not super exciting or memorable.
Yeah, no, like we're closing in on this is really the big climax. This is the big climax. This is the last big action beat of the movie. And it's fine, but it's not like super memorable or anything.
Yeah, it's essentially just a standard chase scene with nothing all that engaging going on.
Mm. And like the bat is cool and the bike is
Yeah,
cool.
catching on the bat is the coolest thing in the whole sequence.
Yeah. But yeah, like if and like granted, for a long time people were like the action scenes were never exactly the height or like the high point of any of these movies. But
And
if
that's
someone was
fair.
like, this is the big climax of the last movie in the Dark Knight trilogy, and it's like not even close to being one of the more impressive action sequences across the three movies, like that really sucks. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, like I think the most emotionally charged action scene out of this whole trilogy is the climax of the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
don't
like
know if you agree with that, but that's how I feel.
stuff in the Dark Knight gets close, and like nothing in this
Yeah.
movie's gotten there.
This is also a pretty funny and laughable, like unintentionally laughable death here.
Oh,
Like
when she
she
the
does
way
like the
that
classic villain last words before she just hilariously just like dies. Like, ugh, like it's
yeah the
really
way
bad acting.
the way that she plays it is so bad. She's like, and now I must go. Yeah.
It's such like your first year in like drama class acting.
Mm-hmm. Or like what's this is like it makes me think of Kevin Kline in A Midsummer Night's Dream, just like pretending to stab himself 5 different times.
I don't love that we're propagating that, but okay.
Propagating which what?
Keep hope alive.
Oh, with the keeping them in the bus thing.
Ugh. Oh, that's ridiculous. Oh, like bombs about to go off. I got time to have this passionate kiss with Catwoman.
Yeah, like, dude, you've got less than 2 minutes. Get the heck out.
I've also got time to have this exchange with Gordon.
And again, just like the Alfred thing, this would be fine if he'd worded it in a way that was remotely natural. It's like you had to choose the most roundabout way of saying what you wanted to say. Just be like, I'm Bruce Wayne. Or probably not that, but like something that's a little less contrived sounding. Like that does not sound natural at all.
No, it doesn't sound natural. But I actually don't. I don't hate that, especially because like in Batman Begins, one of my favorite moments is when Bruce like repeats what Rachel says. It's not what you are, it's what you do that defines me. Like a direct conversation that she had with Bruce earlier, and that's what lets her know that's who Batman is.
Mm.
That's not the same thing we do here, but it is a. He wouldn't be super direct about that. He would find another way of saying I am Batman. Because like you can't have him straight up say that without it coming off a lot goofier than what he actually said is.
Yeah.
Like in this context, he can't just be like, I'm Batman, and then just leave. Like that'd be even dumber. And he didn't really have much of any exchanges with Bruce Wayne over the course of this movie that he could just repeat like he did with Rachel in Begins.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
I don't mind like him calling back to things that only Bruce would know.
I think
To
it's
let
just
him know.
the wording of it feels so clunky.
But I hate this scene. I hate this more than almost anything else in the movie.
Like the fact that he gets out of this.
Yes, like we have light passing over in the face shot, so you know he's in the Batcopter and moving. And then we cut to the time, and then the bomb goes off, and it's like he should be dead. He should be
Alfred's old.
atomized.
Alfred's old. Maybe he was just hallucinating.
No, he's like we're cheating the audience with that, and I hate that.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm trying to play it off, but you're absolutely right. It's really, and this movie's done that a couple of times, like visually, sort of like cheated and not really paid off what it was trying to do, and like tricked the audience and like, oh wait, it doesn't feel clever. It feels lazy.
Or like when the stock exchange chase happens, we start that scene in the daytime. They go under an overpass. They come back out and it's nighttime because Batman showed up.
Oh yeah, I never even thought about it like that. That's also
That's really dumb.
And like you can't even say that it's like the stylistic kind of cheating because that's not like in line with the style of the previous two movies.
Yeah, the first two movies were way more actual grounded than that, and they weren't cheating the audience.
Yeah. And that's part of the whole thing of like this movie gets like weird and silly and heightened sometimes, but it can't commit. So it's not like a big, silly, kind of heightened movie. It just kind of falls into that by virtue of, I don't want to say not trying as hard, but that's how it feels.
And I hate that scene we just had with Alfred because he's like, I failed you. And in the first movie, we had clearly established him as a person who would not give up on Bruce. And then we essentially have him give up on Bruce super early in this movie when he starts being Batman again. And I'm like, I don't like him. He could have changed his position in 8 years, but I wasn't there for that. Moreover, like Bruce wasn't even being Batman for those 8 years. So it's like, what even gets Alfred to the place where he's like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not gonna watch you die.
Like again, that's part of why it feels so forced. Of like they had the idea to take Alfred out, and they couldn't really justify it because he's like, look at Bane. Look at how like strong and ferocious and committed Bane looks. You can't beat him. I'm gonna quit because that's the only way to make you realize how out of your depth you are. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Bane's intimidating, but
intimidating enough that he alone makes Alfred be like, nope, we gotta stop now.
And you don't
That,
even know that much about Bane. You somehow know that he was excommunicated from the League, which, like, it's kind of a leap. I don't know how the heck Alfred even found out that information. But moreover, you don't know the specifics of why that is, what he's truly capable of. Like, you don't really know that much about Bane.
yeah. And I think we talked over the Robin line, but yeah, the line is said with her back to the camera, and it seems like his reaction to it doesn't seem like that's what she was saying in scene. I feel
Yep.
like that Robin bit was added in post.
Yeah, it's just a cute little wink to the fans, and that's fine.
And I
I
guess
mean,
we
I can
talked
see
about
how
the
that would
mention.
rub actual like Grayson fans the wrong way, or fans of Damian Wayne or Tim Drake, because this guy is an original character for this movie. He's Blake. He's not any of those characters. So why are we even entertaining the Robin thing? Especially because we know that he's essentially taking over the Batman mantle. He's not Robin.
Yeah. And we talked over the bit where they were like, oh, well, the autopilot was fixed 6 months ago. And so I guess that, I don't know.
And this is so some people have said this is actually just in Alfred's head. Um,
For
like
as
it's
heightened as this movie can get, it's not that heightened. Like I said that earlier out of jest, I don't think that's what's happening. That's not in line with the approach of these movies. And again,
um
like what you said earlier about Catwoman and how we don't quite go far enough in exploring, like, okay, does she want to keep being a thief and taking down the establishment? Does she want to turn over a new leaf? Here she is with Bruce, and what I assume is just they're just being normal and domestic, and I guess she's comfortable with that now.
yeah. I'm assuming they're out there because of Selena, not because of Bruce, because Bruce, he's not a billionaire anymore, doesn't have any money.
That's
Um,
true.
yeah, so they're probably out there from all the stolen goods that she still has in her back pocket. Um, but yeah, either way, not that's not a great ending for me. Um, like, because this is a Batman that wanted to settle down and have a life and eventually stop. Like, he's not going to spend his entire life being Batman. That's an interesting take, but we don't spend quite enough time with him, and because we have him incapacitated for half the movie, so we just don't spend enough time with him as Selena for me to really be invested in that.
Yeah. I'm like, dang, I knew that we were going to have mostly negative things to say about this movie, but even I didn't foresee us being like this uniformly down on it. But like, I don't know what to say. It's just, I don't think this is a good movie. Like, it has its good performances, and there are things in it that I can see trying to work and like positives trying to get out. But it's just, as a whole, it's a big mess, and not like in the fun way. It's just, it's a bad movie. It's not good.
Yep, that's where I'm at on it as well, and I'm kind of surprised, and but at the same time, like, uh happy that we were actually able to talk all the way through without too much like just silence. We
Yeah,
we were actually
I
finding stuff to
was
talk
worried.
about.
Like, we have a history of finding things to talk about even when it's difficult. So like, go us. But I was worried for a little while there that like I was not looking forward to watching this twice 2 days in a row. I thought I made a mistake by watching it in preparation last night just because watching it by myself with no one to talk about it with as I was doing it was a ridiculous slog. And like I admire Nolan as a director, and I admire a lot of the choices that he made here. Given again, this was an obligation. This is something that he had to do to make the movie he really wanted to make. But this is another one of those things where I feel no reason to go back to it now that we've done this. Like this is probably gonna be like my final word on this movie because I've given it a couple chances now over the course of a couple years, and it's unengaging. Like I don't enjoy it.
Yeah, unless I don't even plan on having kids, but in the event that that actually happens, and my kids are actually into superheroes, like I'm praying that they will be if I even do have kids, I'll show them the Batman movies. So we will eventually get to this. Like I'll sit down and show them this. Um, but yeah, I don't foresee myself purposefully sitting down and sitting through this movie again without that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was our spoiler cast on The Dark Knight Rises. As you said, these don't even get a ton of traffic. God only knows how many people actually sit through most of this. But I don't know. These are always fun to do. So if there's ever another franchise you think we'd both have a lot to talk about, I'm all for doing this again.
Yeah, and like I'm open to even maybe doing TV episodes, not just movies. But yeah, these are fun to do. Like having discussions with you is always a good time, and like they're easy to do. So yeah, why not? But for now, I think we're good. And like as usual, these don't have post credit scenes, so I'm comfortable calling it there. And yeah, so they're both things that we intend on doing later on, like tonight. So I'm gonna call it there, and we'll see what comes next for us. But for now, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. And I'm sorry if you do really like The Dark Knight Rises, and this was just a major downer for you. But that's just the way it is, man.